Okay, so we've created our first feature. Let's look at some geometry. Alright, so I said I wanted to put the sketch fillet in, and I overlooked it, forgot about it. So I want to go back into that sketch and apply the sketch feature. So if I right click on the feature, the first one will edit the feature. That will take me back into the parameters for that feature. I can edit the sketch, and that will put me back into our geometry. Okay, and we can go into the sketch fillet, and the other option is the sketch chamfer. And we have 3 millimeters for our fillet, and the entities to fillet is going to be selecting the point. If for some reason those didn't line up, or I had a gap, I could select the line and the line, or an arc and a line, and end up with the same type of result. Alright, so that gives me the desired geometry. I go ahead and hit OK. So if I hit the little arrow next to, I will see the sketch, and that will also let me edit the sketch. Selecting on the sketch and clicking on the sketch will take me back into the sketch, and right-clicking on the sketch geometry, left click, and then sketch will take me back into the sketch. Or I was on the line, so in this case it created a second sketch. Let's see what, and this is one of those instances where if you end up with a extra plane because of the selection set, that was kind of the result. Alright, so I got that plane. It don't really need it at this point, so I'm just going to highlight it and delete it. So what happens is, if I pick a point and I'm in reference to one of these faces, it will create a plane for me. Alright, so we need some additional geometry. And let's go with the sketch pattern. Typically I'm going to put my fillets in last. Fillets have a tendency to change, or maybe they're not as high a level of accuracy as the rest of my sketch geometry. So we are going to pick the face, and again I have that habit of right-clicking and going into the sketch that easily. I picked my circle, and we're going to come over here, and if I click and drag, that will give me the first circle. Or if I utilize the click, drag to the sum radius, and click, that will give me the same result. If I right click, I'm going to start using these in context. I can go to Smart Dimension. If you like to input the value as you go, you can turn on the numeric input. And what was the other one? Exit the sketch, and then go directly into an extruded boss or base. So if we look across these, we can change to construction geometry, select other geometry, don't really want to make blocks at this point, zooming to selections, and auto insert dimension. Alright, so it's still in the circle command. I hit escape on the keyboard. We're going to right click, go into that dimension, and I'll show you the difference here in a little bit. Now my dimension, my standard is ISO, and the dimension is in purple where yours may be in black, because I've turned off the automatically mark it for the drawing. So it's not a big deal to have some different colors at this point. So when I place the dimension, that drops it onto the screen, and this is our missing one of our missing dimensions. So we're going to put in 6 millimeters, see what it looks like. To locate this off of the back, anything that can be projected, an edge. Let's see, I'm in the screen, so let's rotate this over a little bit. Anything that can be projected into the sketch plane is a valid geometry to pick from. So the edge, the bottom edge, the front edge, bottom edge. You get the point that pretty much anything that I can pick is going to, in most cases, project into that view and be able to apply the dimension. All right, so 19.4, and if I go back to Control 5 in this case, which is the top view, that returns me, or I could hit Control 8 and go normal to the sketch. All right, so it's first position, select the circle. If you select the center point, you won't get a couple of additional parameters which are handy. It's not required, but it is nice to have. So 7.96. So if I selected the center point, I would not get, under the leaders, the ability to go to a minimum or a maximum condition. And occasionally it's handy to see those values, see the separation or inner dimension from the edge to the edge of the hole. All right, so now that those first location is established, let's do a linear sketch pattern. I'm going to pre-select. I'm going to pre-select a lot of things. All right, you don't have to. Again, it's I put it into the category of everybody's going to have their preferred workflow, and there are a lot of self-correcting behaviors. Things that you like, you're going to continue to do, and things that become painful are going to be something that you set aside. So when I come up to the linear sketch pattern, well, it's wanting to go that way, so I don't really have anything in the x-axis. So my logic is that I want 10 millimeters, and for there to be a pattern, there has to be at least 2 instances. I can change this around, but I could also just go to the y dimension. So if I set that to 1 and set that to 2, and we give it, I do want the y spacing and an instance count, and we said that we're going to have a total of 8, and the direction is going up. We have another box, another parameter that says I can reverse the direction. So those combinations I'm looking for, am I going in direction 1 x, direction 2 y? Do I want to change those around, or do I just want to accept the defaults? And we have a dimension of 20 for the spacing, and so the spacing 7 times the spacing with a total of 8 instances. All right, so when I accept that, then it has applied the dimension of 20 and the instance count of 8. Occasionally it's getting a little bit better, but depending on the complexity of your sketch, you may end up with a situation where this doesn't go fully defined, in which case we'll look for the correct relation that says this is going to be vertical, it's going to be horizontal, we're going to apply some dimension. But it comes back to getting familiar with those various parameters. All right, so when I rotate this around, see that I have my holes in location, and now we are removing material. So on the features, I'm going to extrude cut, and this will be a blind in condition of 8 to get it to go through the part. Alright, so right now it's at 160, so it's going way beyond. I want to make sure though that if this 8, I decided to change it to 10 for some reason, that the holes would still go through. So we're going to use some logic that says, do I want to go through all or up to next? And through all or up to next has a result that in the drawing, when I put a dimension, a hole call out on this geometry, up to next will show it as through, and through all will have the notation of through all. So it's not really that big of a deal that you pick. And since we don't have other geometry to be concerned with below this, some other some other feature created, up to next is fine. But the main difference is through all will find its way through every bit of geometry. Up to next will look for that terminating geometry and stop there. So we accept, and that gives me my whole locations. The two holes then, we had the radius of 12, so again I can pick on the face and open up a sketch. Alright, so once we get past the initial planes, then picking on any planar face. Alright, so if it's flat, I couldn't pick on this this arc because of the radius. It would lose its mind. It would tell me I can't. I would have to create an auxiliary plane to pick from. But any of these faces that I can select and right-click and open up a new sketch on are going to put me in that position. And I didn't pay attention if my rotation, so that's one of the things we want to check real quick, since we'll start introducing a few options along the way. Alright, there are tons of options. Any of the modern CAD softwares are going to have tons of items that you can adjust for your workflow. Alright, so I don't really need anything in general. Under the drawings, there is mark all part assembly dimensions for import into drawings. I'll explain my logic later, but I like that one to be unchecked, and that's where my dimensions will show up in purple. Your dimensions are probably showing up in black, so if you uncheck that, you'll get purple dimensions. Under the sketch, I want to auto rotate view normal to sketch plane on sketch creation and sketch edit. Okay, so if that's unchecked, it will stay in what orientation, and then I have to manually rotate it into position or hit one of those Control 8, Control 1 through 7 to get it in position. Alright, so my fingers are on autopilot again. I've selected my sketch plane. We go into the circle. I'm going to click and drag, and that puts the first hole in location. And I don't think those are, but the inference line, we decided those weren't horizontal. But we have the inference line. I want to apply a few more relations with you, so I'm not going to get them too close so that we can see the result. Just because I get that blue inference line, I didn't have any of those little yellow boxes pop up saying that it was going to apply. It may get close, but there is no relation there to apply. So we either come over to Smart Dimension or right click and go to the Smart Dimension. If I turn on the numeric input and then go back in, now it's highlighted in gray that it's active, and I go into the Smart Dimension, I left click and hold down, and not doing it for the circle. Maybe it's for the linear. I was expecting to come up with that little box that was going to ask me for the dimension. Alright, I'll be looking for that. And we go back to select. I could apply another 10 millimeter, but since these are set to two places, I want to see about applying an equal relation. So if I select, hold down the control button, as I hover over, the selection highlights in orange. When I left click, holding down the control button, then I get the pop-ups. If I recognize the symbol or I drag across, I'm going to get those tooltips that say make equal, or I can always come over to the left and say equal. Right, so now if I double click and change to 12, they are both going to change to 12, or both change to 8, and we want them to stay at 10. Alright, so the location, we're assuming that it's at the center of the fillet, and since the fillet is a radius of 12, then that would be 12. And that actually looks a lot lower than on the drawing. So visually, we're going to go with the dimensions and not worry about how visual this is. So that one actually looks like it was moved up. Alright, we're given 138 as our dimension. And again, that math came out to where this is shifted. Alright, so maybe this side was the actual 12. This one, I'm going to try and massage this in. So I decide I don't like that dimension, then I'm going to go ahead and delete. And delete. And let's reapply the dimensions. I'm looking for it to highlight in orange. And before I make the selection, let's go 12. And then select and 12. And I'm going to put those where they're not too confusing. Alright, so with the 138, this is still going to move up and down. And that actually looks a little lower. So interesting results. So I'm going to go ahead with the center point, hold down the control button and the center point, and then make horizontal. Alright, we can always come back when I select that center point. I'm going to see the horizontal, and I can always delete that and make the adjustment later, since it's not quite lining up visually, but our dimensions and the callouts are supporting our geometry. Features, we are removing material, so now instead of creating a boss base, we're creating a cut. And again, I could put in the value, but I want to use that logic that says, since we did up to next last time, let's do through also. When we get to the drawing, we'll see the difference between those two. Alright, so again, if there was other geometry, through all would cut through all of the available geometry, and up to next is only going to look for that next terminating face. Alright, so we have our shapes. That was control 1. Let's go control 3. And we'll rotate that around a little bit. Alright, we've given a radius of 12 in 2 places, but we're going to make the assumption that is a radius of 12 in 4 places. So I can left click to select an edge, hold down the control button, select another edge, and I did not get my additional items. Usually there's another one to pop up. Oh, I'm not in the fillet tool yet. So if I keep selecting, I can pre-select all of those edges. If I have a lot of edges to do, then I would select the first one. We come up to our pop-up and find the fillet. And this has a radius of 12, so we're going to get that preview. When I select the next edge, if I pause before moving, then it's going to give me a selection filter. So I can pick all of the edges. Alright, and if I go to connect to end, that's everything. That is really everything. Alright, so which one did I like? I think that one. And those look pretty good. Alright, so those are just little things that will speed up. And until you get familiar with the workflow and the process, you'll kind of pick the ones that that make sense. So as you go through the process, you're going to be able to find that geometry. Alright, so I'm going to save. We've done enough that I don't want to go back. And now we're going to put in the text. Alright, so I would still like my fillets to be last. So I am going to look for that bar. Alright, the rollback bar at the bottom says I want to treat as if I hadn't created the fillet yet. So when I open up the next sketch, and again I'm picking on a planar face, opening up the sketch, and we're going to go into text. So I'm going to do mine a little bit simpler than old amalgamated. And if I just place the text, so we're going to make this kind of small. I was going to do in MCC, but I think I'll go ahead with the full. And we'll make it in caps. Our rule here is that we can't overlap, and we're going to do a little bit more with the overlaps. But as I position this, it's a little bit bigger, but it fits. I don't have a lot of control over its location. There is an anchor point that when we get out of the sketch tool, just kind of see that little dot. That's the dot that I want to pick to get back. Picking on the text doesn't necessarily put me back into its parameters. We can control the position. So minus 141, how about we just go minus 140? Alright, and 16. Okay, but I'm not going to be able to pick, and text generally isn't going to go fully defined. We're going to talk about those parameters a little bit more. If I want to have better control over this, then I'm going to create a center line. And the difference between a center line and construction line is they are the same. It's just terminology as it's selected. So construction and center line are mutually exclusive. And if I draw a line and decide I want it to be an object line, then I will pick it to toggle between construction and object. Alright, so my numeric input works for the line. It's going to 160, but because I'm using the relations, I don't have to put anything in there. I'm seeing that the little yellow box on the right is showing me that I am going to be coincident and I am horizontal. And I need a location. So if I go back into select, we highlight, I can toggle the construction, or I can toggle from construction to object. Object geometry is going to participate in the feature, and the center line, construction line, will not. Okay, so I want to be able to position this and center, so I'm picking the center line, picking the top edge. We'll make it 15 millimeters. You can pick, you can put whatever text you want in and locate it wherever it looks good. I'm going to pick that dot, that control point, and that didn't put me back into the text. Oh, that put me into the parameters. All right, so let's double click on the text, and this is where we're going to use the curves. So when I select on the curve, now I'm left justified, and now I have a lot more functionality, flexibility. I can put this in bold, metallic. I think we had those, but in the justification now I can center it. The dimension is controlling its location. It's centered on the part. I can also mirror and flip as we go through those different orientations. If I want to change the font, we deselect the document font, and notice that it's also now giving me the text. So if I went to 50% of the text width, that's going to shrink it up. And if I wanted to increase or decrease the spacing, if for some reason the font violated the rules that these were overlapping, that I would be able to stretch these out a little bit and clean up the geometry. So right now, if I go into font, where you are, Century Gothic, pick your favorite font. Don't see much of a difference there except for the little rounds. Those little rounds will actually, if I go to cut this on a CNC machine, those little rounds are going to be generated by a round tool anyway, so having it in there is not that big of a deal. Let's see what Calibre is pretty much a standard, and that doesn't seem like it's updating, so that might have been left over from the Century Gothic. And then what do we get for Arial? Or do we get Arial? Alright, so I want to find Arial. There we go. So these are a little more squared off. I'll go back into the C's. Alright, so a little thinner. And this isn't necessarily going to be single point, but it's going to be pretty close. Alright, so since this is a planar face, we're just going to cut extrude into the geometry. And we're going to give it a small amount, maybe 30 thousandths, just to show it off. Alright, cuts into the geometry, calculates it, and then I roll forward to the fillet and save it. We've created our first part.